As we get older, we are going to become a little bit more fragile. So I think it's very important that we keep conditioning our resolve as we get a little bit older. I do tell people that the gym is the only place that you can reach failure in order to succeed. However, that can have a transcendence effect into so many other areas in your life. Focusing on sleep, I think, is the biggest biohack out there. Levels decline dramatically as we get a little bit older, and our stem cells decline dramatically as we get older. Our ability to recover. I've tested my biological age every year since 2014, and it was older than my chronological age. I'm 50 years old chronologically right now, but my biological age I've been able to reduce to 26. I had the awareness to realize, hold on, there's something wrong here.
Everything you've built on relationships. And I'm not a transaction guy. In fact, I can't stand going through life where everybody's just transacting and taking. You build relationships and you build a future for everyone around you. How has that been important to you in your career and what you've built both today and previously?
It's been extremely important because I grew up on a farm in Wales, and I didn't really interact with a lot of kids. And even as a young adult, didn't interact. All the sports that I participated in were all individual sports. I didn't really like team sports. So, I did motocross from the age of 6 to 19. Then I did downhill mountain bike racing for a few years. Then got into bodybuilding out of those injuries that I'd encountered from the extreme sports, and then Ironman triathlon, ultramarathon, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always been a little bit of a recluse. So creating, I guess, relationships is I have a very small group of people that I interact with, and I have to go into work thinking that it's not work, that it's fun, it's a passion. So I work with people that I really truly enjoy spending time with, and it's very important for me to surround myself with people that are very good at what they do as well, because I recognize my weaknesses. I know where my strengths are. So if I can engage and partner with people that have different strengths, and maybe I can, they can capitalize on my weaknesses, as it were, then it's very, very important. Like the businesses that I have, other than one of them, I'm a co-founder. And I like it that way. It kind of spreads the burden a little bit. And, but I just find that's how the businesses tend to thrive. Of course, you can always find a bad apple somewhere along the lines, and that's just part of life. But I think having that perspective has really changed my overall outcome, because I didn't do well in school. I hated being in school. I just wanted to be on a motocross bike, and it wasn't until I started working out that now I'm eating better. So I've got a better blood flow to the brain. I'm feeding my brain with proper nutrients. And now I was able to kind of remember the stuff that I was being taught. So when I went to college, I thrived in, international health and sports therapy, and I passed very, very easy. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to do something that is a passion for me. Maybe learning a new language wouldn't be the right thing, but sticking to my lane, and of course, cross-pollinating is the way forward for my strengths.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love building a stronger business, a stronger brand, a stronger anything by adding the parts of you through other people that you're not great at. And so my weaknesses or blind spots are opportunities for me to add a partner that can change the dynamic of what we're trying to accomplish together. And I've always been the visionary, the big picture seer. So I'm looking down so far in advance that sometimes that is the greatest asset. And other times, if we're just choosing where to go to dinner for the night, I'm thinking about, well, what are we going to have tomorrow? And what about earlier? And what I got to plan that. And so I go through that. And that's where you need that person that's like, let's just work through today, Scott.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm thinking you're describing me to a T, and even though I may be preaching, you got to be in the present, you got to live in the now, whatever you do today dictates to tomorrow. But if you have that visionary mindset, sometimes you don't think about what dictates tomorrow because you're so far ahead. And then, that can come with its own stresses, but someone else takes care of that fills in the gaps. And now you're walking, step by step to where you want to go.
Yeah, what your listen, your mindset, you were just describing, you went from, being in motocross, having a change that really altered your direction. And then you went into all these individual sports, and bodybuilding and actually working out was something that just stuck. And then it was your passion for the rest of your life. So many people struggle with the internal battle because it's not just about doing it in the action. It's about actually like pressing past those resistance levels and breaking through to the next level. What do you think? What do you think really drove you or helped you to have that mindset? And how do you lead people today into that mindset of success individually?
Yeah, very, very good question. I always like to start my day with hard stuff because it makes the rest of the day a lot easier. And I think that about life. As we get older, we are going to become a little bit more fragile. So I think it's very important that we keep conditioning our resolve as we get a little bit older. And, I do tell people that the gym is the only place that you can reach failure in order to succeed. However, that can have a transcendence effect into so many other areas in your life. Like, how many times I could think back of going to the gym like 2 days ago. I was on very, very little sleep because we got delayed coming out here to Charlotte. And, I really didn't want to train, but I trained anyway because I had to film this workout. But, things, when you go through things like that, there'll be other areas in your life like, God, you know what? I really don't want to do this today. But because you've pushed past that failure point, you're able to do it in life so much easier. So when I say you need to reach failure in the gym, that actually translates outside of the gym. And that's why I love working out. It isn't for aesthetics. It was at one point, but I didn't really get into weight training because I love bodybuilding. I got into bodybuilding because I love weight training, and it's just very, very therapeutic. The reason why I'll do like go out for a long run or do triathlon is because like active meditation. Put me in a room and say, okay, shut your brain off for 20 minutes and meditate. Yeah, I can do it, but I'll struggle a little bit. I've done my 10-day Vipassanas and because I'm a bit of an all or nothing character. But when I'm out by myself without the headphones, I go for a hike, a run, or cycle ride, or a swim. That is where I switch off the world and, I have my active meditation. I do the same in the evening. I go to bed early and I'll read a book for about 30, 45 minutes every night. That is my ritual. And that isn't going to be a self-help book or anything that's going to get my mind wired. That's going to be a detective novel. It'll be an adventure book. I'm reading one about the one man and his bicycle, riding around the coast of the UK. I love that sort of stuff because that gets me to switch off from everything that's happening in the day so I can have a good night's sleep because my recovery dictates my performance, not just physically but mentally.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to think through how by practicing failure, you get better at handling it throughout the day. That's what you're describing is that in the middle of the day, when I hit a wall or something happens in life or business or whatever it is, challenging with the family, if you've hit some peaks and valleys earlier in your day, you're more likely to be able to handle that stuff. And it does really make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, like I get in the ice bath every single morning. I know it's trendy, but I've been doing this for so many years. And the reason being is that, there's not a day that I want to get in the ice bath, and far from it, but I do it anyway because I know how much better I'll feel after. And, we know that it can help with blood sugar stability throughout the day because I'll test it on my CGM. But I honestly believe, and I know for sure that it helps with mental stability throughout the rest of the day. So not only am I starting the day with hard stuff, that I don't want to do, but I'm going to do it anyway, I get that better mental stability throughout the day. So I'm not as reactory. I'm in a much more calmer state. But, you have to make the sacrifice and sometimes prioritize that sacrifice if you want to enjoy the success.
I did mine this morning.
Good
I have
boy.
one. I do it every day, and I also hate it. So it's one of those things that I woke up this morning and I told my wife. I said, I really don't want to do it today. And I didn't even like vocalizing it, but I said, I just don't want to do it today. There's certain days I just don't feel like doing it at all. And I said, all right, I'm going to go make my coffee. I'm going to start it and have it ready so that when I get out of the ice bath, I'm going to have my coffee and then I'm going to go do my workout afterwards. And so I made a ritual so I'm able to kind of I have something to look forward to. I also pray or meditate while I'm in there. So I just set a timer of whatever the prayer is for the day, whatever the reading is for the day, and I actually stay in for whatever that timeline is. So I don't know every day. It could be 3 minutes and 15 seconds. It could be 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So mentally, it kind of makes me go past what I was maybe willing to do, not just a typical couple of minutes. Um, and I too started doing it I started doing it around 2016 because I was having some back issues and I was trying everything. So I was doing the cryotherapy, I was doing massage, I was just trying to get organized. What I learned is my body was yelling at me because I was starting a new endeavor, a new business, and I was leaving the comforts that I was used to. And so while I started to do that, it started to change the dynamic of how I handled the day. So I couldn't agree more. That pain in the morning makes everything else just a little bit easier throughout the day.
100%. And don't you find it's amazing how much you can clear your mind and retain, in your case, is prayer, as opposed to doing that like in a room or somewhere else. When you're in the ice bath, you have no distraction. You've got your thoughts, and that is it. When I mentioned earlier about meditation, active meditation, when I'm in the ice bath, if I'm doing breath work or meditation, that is the most profound time to do it. You want to do it with complete mental clarity. That's the perfect time.
Nothing clears you out quicker than feeling like you're going to die the second you hop in. I mean, you have to calm yourself. And even times I'll notice my breathing is getting out of control, or I'll be breathing heavier, and I'm like, hey, calm the brain. And you just calm the body, calm the brain, and everything's better. And to your meditation point, I think a lot of people struggle with this because they think that meditation is something that they're supposed to be able to just be good at right out of the gate. For people that have busy minds, especially that ADHD, like hyperactive mind, it's very difficult to calm down. But it wasn't until I actually started meditating that I realized I'd been meditating for years when I listen to music. When I
Mhm.
listen to music, I was highly centered. I was paying attention to the rhythm, the beat, the words, the story. I was all in. And I've been like that since I was a child. And so I had always been meditating, but I found my meditation through music. And I think the more you meditate, the more you realize that there's lots of ways to find that peace within your day.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You don't have to be in a cross-legged Zen position to be meditating, and it doesn't have to be in complete silence. Like I remember being with my meditation instructor, and we could hear like the garbage cans, outside being cleared out on a Friday morning. And she said, invite that noise in. So whenever there is a noise or distraction, I do invite that noise in. Now, I will cheat every now and again, especially if I'm traveling, and I'll use, some biohack. So I'll have the headphones on, the glasses with the flashing lights. So I'm getting the binaural beats. You have the quadraphonic sound, and you have the light therapy penetrating your retina, even though your eyes are closed. And that's like, I guess, meditation on steroids. It's a cheat code, and that's where kind of like the biohacks come in every now and again, as opposed to relying on ancestral wisdom.
What are your favorite biohacks? I mean, I think my wife and I are doing an entire peptide routine right now. We're testing, as we go through this, we're writing down, journaling what we're noticing that's different, what's not. We're constantly pressing the boundaries to find a better health for ourselves. And I'm always interested in what you're doing on the cutting edge, because I think there's, maybe break it down into two things. What's the everyday stuff that you think anybody could be doing from a biohacking standard? And what are some of the edgier things that you're trying, like what you were just describing?
Okay, got it. So we'll start off with like the free stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, our ancestral stuff actually is just like grounding, earthing as much as possible. Like I know a lot of people, what I'm about to say is a bit woo woo, but if you look at stuff that Clint Ober has done, he's got a great book out called Earthing, and Earthing the movie you can find on Vimeo, I think. And there are studies that show that it can remove inflammation. And we know that we're being penetrated by non native EMF, Wi Fi. We don't see it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And I know for one, there are people that are electrosensitive more than others. Some people are more sensitive to mold and other people aren't. But I have found, like, if I have an EMF reader in my hand and my phone in the other hand, then that EMF goes all the way up. If I take my shoes and socks off, it goes down because now it's penetrated through me, but I'm getting penetrated all day. So I will take my shoes and socks off, ground. If you want to have the biohacking version of that, you can get trainers that are very comfortable today. They're not like like the Jesus sandals or anything. They, very comfortable trainers where you can run in. So I wear them as much as possible, especially when I'm traveling on planes, going through airports where I know everybody's on their phone, there's Wi-Fi everywhere. And I found that has really, really helped with my sleep so much more in doing so. The other thing would be, trying to block out as much blue light before bed. So if you're not wearing like the blue light blocking glasses, then you just don't have the flicker on. Like I said, you pick up a book and read that for an hour before bed. The upstairs of our house does look like a brothel because I do have the red lights up there, but you don't necessarily have to have the red light bulbs. Just switch off a lot of those lights and just have your bedside lamp on and read for a little bit, because that flicker does increase cortisol, and now you cannot release melatonin, oxytocin, serotonin, which lulls you to sleep. And as we know, we are living in a world that is of constant distraction. We're on our phones, we're scrolling, we're ordering off Amazon, we're responding to emails all on our phones all the time. Not only is that releasing dopamine, but the blue light from that is releasing dopamine as well. So I always try to get people to kind of mitigate as much of their time as possible. Bookend the day. The first hour in the morning, no phone. The last hour in the evening, no phone. So those would be some of the everydays. Um, the ice bath, the sauna, I'll obviously do that when I'm at home. The more advanced, we could talk a little bit about peptides. I'm actually going to the World Peptide Congress in next month, actually, in Vegas. Very fascinating. I love peptides, peptide bioregulators. This is a story that I'll tell you that's absolutely 100% true. So I do a lot of sports. I get into a lot of accidents all the time, and as I'm getting a little bit older, I don't heal as much as I used to. So, snowboarding at the end of in December, just gone, I wiped out, tore my meniscus, knocked a big chunk of cartilage out of my shoulder. And I've torn everything in my shoulder before, and I've had an anchor in there, and I thought I'd pulled the anchor out maybe. And an MRI told me that I'd knocked a big chunk of cartilage. And I thought, well, that's new. I've never done that before. What's the outcome? What can we do? And they said, well, there's nothing that you can do. And it was really, really bad. I could not lift my arm whatsoever. And I went down to CPI, which is in Mexico, that does stem cells, and I've been there probably on 4 occasions now. That completely fixed my meniscus, touch wood. I wasn't expecting it to do anything for the cartilage, and even Scotty, the owner, said, "Look, I don't think it'll do anything, but it won't hurt." He was correct. It didn't do anything, and it didn't hurt. I spoke to a surgeon in New York that does 3D printing of cartilage as well. I wasn't a candidate because it was in a awkward area. So I thought, okay, last resort, I'll go on to peptides. So I did the peptide bioregulator Sigma for the first month. I'd planned to do Cartilax, which is an injectable peptide, for the second month. And then on third month, I was going to stack them both together because I like to do everything in isolation to see what works and what doesn't. After the first month of just the oral Sigma, completely healed, grew back the cartilage. Would you believe it? So peptides are something that I will lean upon every now and again because it's fascinating to me, and how it can reverse a biological age if you're taking something like an epitalon. Keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, but how it can lower the enzymes of the liver if you have high enzymes. You know, uh, I don't know, from alcohol or whatever it may be. It's just amazing what they can do. And then everybody's heard, or most people have heard of the body protective compound like BBC 157. The amount of people that have taken that peptide and had great outcomes are unbelievable. And then I'd say the other thing is, stem cells have been a lifesaver for me. I tore my tricep 68% off the bone a few years ago. Helped, I had to have surgery, but the healing process was greatly increased due to, BBC, GHKC, and TB500. And but the other things that I like to do, I like to breathe in molecular hydrogen. So I have a molecular hydrogen machine. I do the tablets in the morning, but I'll usually do that sometime during the day. I'll take a break. Now, maybe I'm going to read or I'm going to work a little bit, but I'll be lying on my PEMF mat, my pulsed electronic magnetic field therapy, whilst breathing in hydrogen. And I find that's really good at just oxygenating the body. And it's very healing from a systemic standpoint. So that's probably a little bit more cutting edge. I've got other things lying around the house that I'll use every now and again. And the other thing is just like a treadmill desk. So usually at home, I'm working or doing a podcast from my treadmill desk because I think a lot of people make the mistake of going to the gym, they do their cardio, and now they're sat in their ass all day. Well, if we want to obviously have good insulin sensitivity, we want to have good blood flow to the brain throughout the day. That's when we're usually most creative. Think back to our ancestors. They were moving all the time. If you look at blue zones where people are centenarians living to a disproportionate age, You know, a lot of the time they don't have a word in their language for retirement. They're constantly moving. And so I like movement as a part of my protocol.
Yeah, that's huge. Just for clarification, are you going to the what is it the facility in Tijuana just over the line, or is it another facility
That's
that
right.
you're going to? Okay.
No, that's it, CPI. So, that's owned by Ed Clay. I don't he's got, quite a popular podcast out there, brilliant mind, and his business partner, Scotty. You know, they've both been in the MMA world, for many, many years, so they know Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan gives them a shout out every now and again. But
Yeah.
I've been to other facilities. I've been to Costa Rica. Um, that's good as well. You know, Panama, you know, the places
Yeah.
like Panama and
I know Tony Robbins talks about the
yeah,
Panama place.
that's it.
That's his spot, right?
That's it. That's it. So they're all good. I've personally found me just personally CPI as being the better because they have great stem cells, but they have a great protocol where that you're eating organic, grass fed while they're there. You have a protocol to follow about a month before you go, and then 3 months following. And you're doing the ozonated IVs, you're doing the NAD IVs if you're a candidate,
Right.
you're doing hyperbaric oxygen, you're doing PEMF, you're doing all these modalities around your stem cells that really help proliferate and stabilize those stem cells. So I think it's very, very, very a good facility. So
I
I do
I
visit there
love it.
more often than I should.
Yeah, well, it's gotta feel great. I haven't done it yet. It's something that I've evaluated and I've gotten pretty close. I just haven't made the decision to go out and try it. I'd like to have that reboot. I think it's really good. I kind of look at our bodies almost like our cell phones. You know how it starts to get wonky for no reason at all. You're like trying to send a text and you can't hit the I or the T. And
Yeah.
like I think our bodies go through that. They just need a hard reset. And we're doing all the things, whether it's grounding or the basic things that you're talking about. These are all ways to reset our body, but it doesn't hurt if there's some cutting edge ways to actually redevelop the cartilage or the muscle mass or the healing and inflammation that happens by just utilizing what resources exist today.
Yeah, well, our NAD levels decline dramatically as we get a little bit older, and our stem cells decline dramatically as we get older. You know, our ability to recover. And, you know, if you are interested in reversing your biological age and not just trying to get over injury, then it's phenomenal. You know, I've tested my biological age every year since 2014, and it was older than my chronological age. I'm 50 years old chronologically right now, but my biological age I've been able to reduce to 26. And I honestly believe, you know, obviously like the, you know, the grounding, the meditation, trying to stay in a parasympathetic state, focusing on sleep, I think is the biggest biohack out there. But taking in stem cells and obviously taking exogenous NAD as well, I think is very, very important. You know, that is our reboot. Of course, we want to add the stem cells to a localized area. Great, take care of that. But maybe take it as an IV just to take care of everything else, all of our organs, our brain, liver, kidney, everything.
It's a total reboot.
Yeah, for sure. You know, if you're
Yeah.
thinking about doing it, let me know and I can certainly make an introduction, see if you're a
Right.
candidate. Are you thinking for your back?
Well, no, I haven't had any issues with the back
Oh,
since
that's good.
2016, and a lot of it came from some of the things that you're mentioning, just making sure that I was rebooting the body. I started doing the cold therapy. That alone cuts down on the inflammation. It also centered me starting the day. I also started, I'm a sprinter. I think you have to know who you are and what you're great at, and I'm a sprinter. Sprinters like to run super fast and stop and breathe. And even on the soccer field, when I was growing up playing and playing for years, I'm a striker. I run fast, I stop, I walk, I sprint, I run, I walk. Like there's got to be, but in business, I never did that. In business and work, I started my day sprinting and I sprinted until I crashed. And eventually, what happens is you're running your body out and your body can't recover or replenish. And so, I'll do a 20-minute power nap in the middle of the day. I'll do breathing exercises in between appointments. I'll walk. I don't start fast anymore. Nothing starts in my day before a certain time. And it's sauna, cold plunge, and workout that are leading. So now I feel like I've already accomplished stuff. So by the end of the day, I'm not worried about going to bed early. What I found was I was so worried about staying up late for so long because I felt like I had no time to myself. And so you have to actually take the time to yourself. So all the things that you're talking about are starts. I would say I've had some autoimmune issues with the gut and things like that. early in my 20s, and again right around the time that I started the business and got uncomfortable again in 16. So all of it was linked together. When I learned those things, I've been able to control it, heal it, and make it much better. But I know that it's always still in the backdrop. It's still how my body handles stress is unique to me. And so I have to learn how it is that I can cope with it. I wear the Whoop, so that's been something I started wearing in 2019. And to your point, just the actual sleep, that was the number one. It's the simplest thing, folks. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but the number one thing I noticed is how little sleep I was getting, and consistent times. And so I've adapted and adjusted that, and that alone has increased my ability to recover. So I mean, all that to say, we're working every day to get better. And so I think the stem cells could be like a reboot, a reduction in inflammation, the little aches and pains and the things I beat down after playing 20 something years of 2 to 3 times a week in soccer and all the things that we've done. I think that that allows me to just relax.
Yeah, yeah, you're completely right there, and it's having the awareness is the number one thing because I was very similar in the way that I would like, I'm gonna out-train you, I'm gonna outwork you, it doesn't matter if I'm on 3 hours sleep, it's just very egotistical,
Yeah,
and, there's only you can't push the body and the brain that far for that long before it packs in, and I was sleeping for about 3.5 hours a night, and because thinking, I just got to get everything done. But then had the awareness to realize, hold on, there's something wrong here because I was trying every supplemental intervention, even medication intervention, nothing worked. And it wasn't until 2014 I got diagnosed at Dr. Spanaug's clinic in Oldsmar, Florida, with mold toxicity. And I'd gone to a lot of other doctors, and someone said, I think you may have this. And it was mold toxicity that I'd got from an apartment in Mumbai. Mumbai. I was living in Mumbai for a little while. So going through that detoxification protocol and then realizing the important was for sleep was number one because it was at that time that I had my biological age test, and I thought, hold on, I'm doing everything right. I'm eating healthy. I'm hydrating. I'm not, doing drinking and whatnot. Why is my age older? It was sleep. It was sleep. Sleep was the number one biohack. So that is a ritual for me now. And like you said, having that quantification on your Whoop is like having a personal trainer on your wrist saying, you better get to bed. You got to focus on your sleep because your body and brain will thank you so much more after. And you've done the soccer and you've done the manual labor, but it's amazing how much more exhausting is you get from the decision making fatigue. It is crazy how that can
unbelievable.
have an effect because I can do manual labor. I grew up doing manual labor and I love it. It's fine, but it doesn't exhaust me as much as being in front of the computer all day.
No. I think, I came back, we did a big national conference, and I had to be on for, like, a week straight, and, I mean, on from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed, like, one of those types of weeks,
Yeah.
and then I went right into flying in to see my son who had this 3-day, 4-day soccer tournament, and every day we were in the car and we're driving, and it's a hour, an hour and a half drive there, hour
Oh,
and a half drive back, like, there was no recoup, and I was just running on fumes, and it took me probably 2 to 3 days to get back to where I needed to. And it was the cold plunge, the sauna, the going to bed super early. And but the older we get, the harder that becomes. And I think something that I always like to ask, especially when I'm dealing with someone who's been such a transformational leader in the space of fitness. If I'm a father of a couple of kids, or I'm mom and I've got my children, and I've lost a little bit of who I used to be and I want to change it. I'd love to hear how you start that journey. And the one thing I wanted to just say before you went there was it always seems to me like the very things you and I were just talking about are almost like the first building blocks of getting us there. So if the first thing we did was just focus on the simplest, dumbest thing we could do, which is let's sleep a little bit more and make sure we're prioritizing it, we start to have less decision fatigue. We start to have a little bit more brain power to move through. So, but I know that's not it, but that's just one thing that I think is a great start.
Yeah, sleep is definitely it. When people sign up for me and they want to transform, they want to put on muscle, they want to get ready for an Ironman, or they're doing a motocross event or whatever it may be, they're expecting a training program and a nutrition program straight out of the bat. And I'm looking at what, because they have to tell me exactly what their routine is. First thing is usually, no, I'm not going to give you that. I need you to get to bed earlier first. That is their accountability to help get better sleep. And then a lot of the time, especially with my European clients, is hydration. Their brains aren't functioning correctly and their bodies aren't functioning correctly because they're dehydrated. And when a body's made up of at least 70% fluid, of course you're going to burn out. You're going to have a headache. You're going to have brain fog. You have to be hydrated. And okay, I'm not talking about massive volume like a gallon and a half every day. Maybe put some electrolytes in there so you are adequately hydrated. And then movement is going to be third in that process usually, because if they aren't moving as much as they should be, let's get that step count up. Let's get the movement in. Let's get the synovial fluid into the joints, the blood into the connective tissue, into the brain. Okay, now we can actually start working towards our goal. But let's get the basis in first. People want to go, hey, what supplement stack should I be taking? Well, hold on, you're not even eating enough yet. Let's get the food right first. And the supplements is only 3% of what your overall gains are going to be. Of course, if I look at their blood, there may be deficiencies in there. Maybe they need higher vitamin D because that is a hormone, and maybe their brain isn't functioning enough because they're low on vitamin D. But it's usually those basis. And then I think it's very, very important for some people, not everybody, but a lot of people, is to write down. Start off the day with some form of journaling. And even if that's just 2 minutes, 2 lines, 5 minutes, whatever, we can work upon that, because I want that person to reaffirm the reason why they're starting, because I can guarantee 3 months or 6 months later, they're questioning it. They're looking for a way out. So now they can reflect back on what was very important at that time. But because life gets in the way, there's ebbs and flows. Now they're going to use that as a justification of getting out, and they can't, it's very easy to do so. Like, there's one way usually of pushing forward for that particular person. There's a million ways of why they can come up with a justification for their excuses as to why they shouldn't.
It's huge. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think the older we get, the more we see that because we're taking care of ourselves, eating healthy, exercising on a regular basis, that we become the anomalies and not the norm. And what we'd like to do is adjust and change that back to where the norm is a healthy human body across the country, across the world. Whether it's hydration and movement, these are all things that start with self-awareness. And so if you're journaling and you're self-aware every day, you're kind of grounding and centering yourself with that mindset to start the day and build off of it, which is huge. And I could see the value in that.
Yeah, I think a vision board is very powerful as well. If you like, I do it very ghetto. Haven't done one this year. I don't want to reach too far, too many goals. Last year I did 85 flights. I'm already up to 40 this year. I'm like, okay, no vision board. So I just have like a bit of, like, maybe I just had a box sent to me. Okay, I'm going to cut that out. And now I'm sticking things on there and I'm writing things on there. And I've got that directly behind my computer. So I'm going to like glance at it every single day to just reaffirm why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now, maybe a few things will change. We'll change those goalposts a little bit, but for the most part, I think it's very, very important. And when looking at today's society, I don't want to sound like an old man when I say this, but I guess I will be. Over the past, say, 15 years, we've had the growth of social networks. And, all I see, of course, we have the distraction, but people want to reach their goals now, not prioritizing the sacrifices. They're just looking at the success. So they're cutting corners and they don't have the patience. And I think it's very, very important that you do prioritize the patience, much like you prioritize your health, and the aesthetics will come. But people will sacrifice their health sometimes to get those aesthetics or get that performance out of themselves, because that's what they see online, not knowing that that overnight success may have taken 20 years. And you see it in the entrepreneurship spirit as well. Everyone wants to burn the candle at both ends and be the Gary V and not sleep and go get it. And I think you just have to break it down and bring it back a little bit and take it a little bit easier and have patience.
Well, to 2 points off of that. Number one is on your vision board. And my four components of a high performance life are actually what I used exactly as you described the vision board. I would actually take one of those huge calendars, the big ones that you'd put on a desk.
Yep.
I'd flip it over and I'd draw just a T across the whole thing and I'd break it up into four parts because what I found as a self awareness tool, I was always really great at one thing at one time, but I wasn't so great at all the other things. So maybe I was killing it in my entrepreneur journey, but I was not dedicating the time and energy I needed to my family. And I was noticing that there were gaps or things that I had to talk with my family about, or things I wanted to do, or things we dreamed of doing. And I would lay all of it out under the who's. And then I would go into impact. What am I doing? How am I doing it? But is it only my career or is it outside of my career? And I'd go into faith and I'd go into energy. And there were times where my energy was low because I wasn't sleeping good and I wasn't. So, all through my career, I go through every year, build out this model for the next year, write down everything. And in the last like 4 years, I started connecting them between the areas and I started to circle who are the people that actually build me in other areas? Who can 10x my decision making? So I started to think at such a higher level than I had for the decade before. And so now mine looks like this. It's a vision board, but it's really just my four components of life. And it's such a great tool to kind of brain dump everything that's in your brain to get it out and then prioritize only the most important things. That's what you're aiming for. And only after you hit those do you go to the next ones. And so that's I'm like you. There could be 85 and maybe there's 40 that are accomplished, but I'm working through. Sometimes I don't look at it for 6 or 8 months, and I go back and I just start circling all the things that I've done, just as a focus on the gain, not the gap that I'm still missing. And such a powerful tool. And then the only other point, and I'll be quiet because I want to hear your input. But the other thing is the pain in the beginning of starting something new, whether it's a business, whatever, it's awful. I mean, I started a new 12-week workout the other day. I've been basically maintaining to be healthy for the last 10 years. And I was like, you know what? I need to build more muscle. I need to focus on building more muscle. I'm not focusing on my legs as much. I'm not doing these things. Nothing's worse than a leg workout twice a week that's built off a heavy weight, that's kicking your ass. And then the next 3 days, you question every single decision that you've made. I mean, I literally walked the steps today and I was like, this is awful. And but I'm like 8 weeks in right now. And so now it's a half a day to a day that I'm sore versus 3 days that I'm sore. And you start to build that pain tolerance is not about getting more comfortable with the pain. It's kind of just about creating the discipline and the resistance to know that it goes away and you can move on. So, I mean, those are just 2 points to what you were saying that I really love.
Yeah, so I always say that scar tissue is stronger than regular tissue. So, if you are breaking down the muscle tissue like that, eventually it's going to get stronger as it turns into scar tissue. And the one thing that I'm just realizing that you made a point on where, don't focus so much on the weaknesses, focus on the strengths. That is a weakness of mine, and it has been. And I've just started to become aware of that now from business, basically. With, let's say if you've got some products on a shelf and three of them aren't working, then maybe don't focus on them anymore. You focus on the ones that are working. Where in the gym culture, I've never been able to kind of translate that because I've always said, yeah, turn your weaknesses into weapons. If your hamstrings are weakness, we prioritize that. It kind of makes sense, but it doesn't always make sense in the real world. And I've just started to kind of realize that after all these years. So I'm glad that you brought that point up. But it's entirely true. It's 100% true. It's just having the perspective every now and again because when you're so focused and so driven, you miss all the small things. Like what Bruce Lee said. You miss out on all the beauty of the world when you're just focused on this one thing. And I think that's why it's very very important to have good business partners that bring that to a head, so you can go, aha, that's my aha moment. You're right. Let's work on that. And I've never been one of these people that excels at one thing. So I like to do a lot of things that kind of cross pollinate each other, and hopefully collectively they will excel.
Yeah, it's that circle. If you draw 3 circles, as long as they're all connected, you're good, but they can connect. The best stuff connects in the middle,
Yeah.
in those three parts, and you really have where they come together. That's what you're aiming for. That's the most important, the true pollinator in the middle of the flower there. Um, but I also agree, I can't do one thing. I'm so bored with one thing. I
Yeah.
mean, if I only do one thing, it definitely does not. I'm a peripheral thinker. And so I think that's always interesting to me. Another thing that you said that's super cool is when you're thinking about this weakness part, right? And you want to focus on what's weak. So the hamstrings, my hamstrings have always been weak. So, focusing on it is always painful. It's the most painful thing when you start building something that's bad. But the other part, when you think about it in business, I was having a conversation with a good friend just yesterday, and they were telling me about their industry, and their industry is in a lull. And they, in the conversation, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and maybe there's something else I should be doing. And I said to them, I said, maybe it's just a deliverable about how you're doing it. Because you just told me you were born to do this. So if you're born for transformational body building and the health and fitness world. Sometimes I think people get so caught in the deliverable that they're in right now. So think of traditional supplements, right? If they never step out and start looking at peptides, or they never step out and start looking at other things, they're not really aware. It's just a different mindset. So maybe the deliverable that we're putting it in right now, that product isn't working, but maybe it's just the way that we need to open up the mindset. Maybe it's not the product, it's actually the way we're delivering the product. And I think that's where people forget that weakness isn't always about the short stuff. It could be about that peripheral stuff as well.
Yeah, and it's the way, like you said, it's the way that you communicate it and deliver it. Like with let's go back to team sports. A good coach isn't going to yell at everybody. Maybe they're going to yell at someone because that person receives it much better when they're yelled at. But another player may need a more of a sympathetic ear that is going to communicate with them. And it's exactly the same with the real world with clients. You have to talk to everybody a little bit different, but some people really need a full breakdown of explanation. Like when you were talking about peptides, it's not as if you can go onto a peptide site and get all the information there because it's for research purposes only. So you have to do all the background and make them feel comfortable that this is something that could work very, very well for them. And, when it comes to, it's funny, I was the editor in chief of bodybuilding.com back in 2007 to 2012. And I always had this conflict because I was publishing articles, and a lot of the time they would contradict each other. They really, really would. But it wasn't that one was wrong and one was right. It's just there's different ways of skinning that cat or climbing to Everest. And the same for you to attain a physique, whether you're doing
Right.
keto, carnivore, whatever it may be. But that individual just needs to find which is the best chapter that works for their book. And then it's much like reading books. You read a book and maybe not all of it is for you, but there's one chapter. So that chapter goes into your book and you write your own eventually. But you, as the communicator or as the expert, you have to help them distinguish which are the best chapters for their book.
Yeah, it's great. It really is interesting, but a lot of that really comes down to self-awareness. And a lot of our challenges really begin and end with us and where we are right now, where we want to be and how we're going to get there. And when we're aware of the things that are holding us back, maybe it's as simple as getting a good night's rest and putting more time into yourself so that you can actually be better to the rest of the world. And I think people struggle with that. I think that's a really challenging thing that I know I've struggled with it in my life. I struggle with it less today because I've started to prioritize something about 40 change. Now I'm 40, I'll be 47 in a couple of weeks. I mean, something about 40 kind of changed the logic of how I was thinking. It was this this opening of curiosity, but also an awareness of where you've been to not make the same mistakes, and then being willing to slow down just a little bit more because you know that it's worth it. You can't smell those roses and see and be outside and feel nature if you don't actually stop and look at some of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's one of the main reasons why I went and did a 10-day Vipassana, because I think when you have like the mindset of an entrepreneur or an athlete, the hardest thing that you can do is not do more, it's do less. If I'm working with a high performer, Usually, I'm getting them to when they show me their workout, that I'm getting them to do less. Okay, we need to recover a little bit more because your central nervous system's fatigued, adrenal fatigue, whatever it may be. And that's usually the most difficult thing. And I'm kind of like that all or nothing character. So I was like, okay, this is getting too much. I'm going to go and do a 10-day Vipassana where I'm going to be meditating from morning till night, can't make eye contact, can't take anything to read or listen. You are just in meditation. And I found it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, I've gone overseas and I've done medicinal journeys. I've gone to Costa Rica and all these things. And it was just in Idaho actually doing this 10-day Vipassana. I was like, wow, that was it. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the most profound and most rewarding because I remember driving there and I didn't notice the mountains or the shape of the clouds, but on the way back, it's as if I hadn't driven there. It's as if I was transported there because now I'm noticing everything. When I'm walking outside, I could actually hear the wind brushing through the grass. I never noticed that before. I'd walk along the same path every day, and it was only like on day 5 or day 6 in this Vipassana, I'm noticing things. And I wonder, how much do we go through life not noticing the now or appreciating everything within our presence because we're focused on things that we feel that are important, but maybe they're not necessarily as important as we've made them out to be, because we do miss out on so much that we have a lot to be grateful for. Like I love the fact that I live in Boise, Idaho. I love the fact that I can go camping and mountain biking, and I have the 4 seasons, so I can go snowboarding. It's beautiful, but it's very easy for you to kind of take that for granted. And luckily, I do travel. I want to travel less, but I do travel a lot. Like I have businesses in India. I got a gym franchise there, and you're exposed to a lot of poverty. And some of these people that really have nothing, they will offer whatever they have. They will invite you into their homes, and they seem so happy, so grateful. Yet I'll work with, say, a celebrity, and find that they're just so depressed, they're so down because they're kind of contained or contained to their home, and they feel that they can't go out and be themselves. So I totally get that, but it makes you appreciate things so much more. As bad as it is, as good as it is, you do appreciate the now so much more by having that perspective. And it's a good reminder, especially as we get a little bit older. We don't want to be one of those people that's working towards retirement. Now retirement comes and we're depressed and we're libidoless, and then we have no purpose.
As you're talking about the drive back and noticing the clouds, 19 years ago today, I became a father, and my oldest turns 19 today. And I was thinking about, I was working, my wife was calling me, telling me it was time to go, and I was delaying her because I had something we were working. We had a huge event that night, and I was like, "You don't understand. I have 30, 40 people coming. Nobody ever, this never sells out." Like, like literally so driven that I'm missing it. And I want you to, we speed there, we get there, everything's great. I become a father. 3 years later, in 3 days, 3 years and 3 days later, my youngest son comes. We're driving to the hospital, and I look up and I tell my wife, "Look at the sunset. Look how gorgeous the sunset is tonight." Like, just the experience of having known that I missed this the way I wanted to experience it the first time, and the second time just slowing down, leaving early, being there, knowing how we were in it together, like just the drive. I remember vividly every aspect of the drive to the hospital that day. And yet I remember the moment the first one came out. You have these moments that you don't want to ever forget. But to your point, I think that all we're doing is we go through life's experiences and we have something that's profound, and we have a choice. Are we going to use it and build off of it? Or are we going to move on from it? And I think so many days we have lots of those moments and lots of those conversations like we're having today. I mean, Kris, I could talk to you all day long. This is an awesome conversation. Your experience and your life has been something that's really fun to follow. When I get to do a little research on this, I mean, I have like 3 pages worth of questions here that we could have talked about that we didn't even get to. So we'll have to do it again another day because we could talk for a long time. We'll do it live next time, so we can really get that vibe going and make sure that the energy in the room is at full capacity. But I think these are the moments that we really experience and we're really blessed to have. And I'm grateful that you've been a participant of this show and sharing your story with our audience.
Yeah, I'm honored and I feel very, very lucky that I have this opportunity because I remember growing up on a farm in Wales that I'd be looking in the magazines. I'm like, okay, they must be doing this and taking that supplement because that's what they're next to with no opportunity to engage. But now we have that opportunity. So I'm absolutely honored and really, really grateful that I could share this experience and this frequency with you, brother.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tell people how to find what you're doing right now because one of the things I like to do on this show is folks, I interview some amazing people, people that are actually doing things and they have unbelievable products and they're doing all these things that you probably know and see every day, but it's really important that you get to know the human behind what the person is doing because then you know who to trust and who not to trust. So, as we got to know you as a human, what are some of the things that you're doing that people should be paying attention to or that they can follow and be a part of your journey?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. So I just tell people, look, they can go to my Instagram because I got a few different websites because I've got my supplement brand Unmatched. I've got a gym franchise in India, Gethin gyms, and it's all like I've got a lot of pollination that's happening out there. So I just tell people go to Kris Kris Gethin Gethin, my Instagram, and if anybody's got any questions, I always answer my DMs.
Well, Kris is an awesome guest. We're going to definitely do this again in the future. I'm going to see him in Charlotte or Boise or somewhere, and he's going to see me in Virginia Beach. So, Kris, thanks for having the time for us today, and thanks for giving us a great show.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Scott.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.